I'm honored to introduce our keynote speaker. He is Kevin de Léon. He is the President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, and he was the first Latino to be elected to that position in the past 130 years. His agenda includes combating climate change, building a clean energy economy, improving retirement security for low-income workers, supporting California's growing diverse communities, fighting homelessness, and providing protections and opportunities to our immigrant residents, and making college more accessible and affordable. His legislation has created the most ambitious renewable energy goals in the nation, first of its kind retirement savings program for low-income workers, and he has required a quarter of all cap and trade revenue be spent in disadvantaged communities. If that's not enough, he also has an extensive record on women's rights and workers' rights and gun violence prevention. So please join me in welcome our keynote address, Senator Kevin de Léon.
And to each and every one of you, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity that you have given me to share a few words with each and every one of you. Now, I know that the past year has been a very difficult year for those of us who acknowledge the urgency of climate change and, quite frankly, want to see real action. It's easy to see the news and obviously feel very angry at what's happening in Washington, D.C. and other parts of the country, and feel the sense of lack of hope about the future. Clearly, there are many challenges ahead of us, whether it's trade disputes, whether it's tax credits, or whether it's Trump's tweets. But there is also boundless opportunity, and despite the vacuum of leadership in Washington, California's commitment, and I want to be very clear, with each and every one of you, without any sense equivocation, without any ambiguity or any sense of vagueness with what I'm about to say. California's commitment to a clean energy future is stronger than ever, regardless of who occupies the White House today. Now, I've never been more proud to call this state my home, our state, the great state of California, because under both Democratic and Republican administrations, going back to Ronald Reagan, when he was the governor of the state of California, California has consistently pushed for cleaner air, cleaner water, as well as energy, more efficient buildings and vehicles, and strong protections for our cherished natural landscapes and resources. These efforts were driven by necessity, not by ideology. Californians were literally sick of breathing dirty air and drinking dirty water, and the consequences were holding our economy back. By following the science and taking common sense steps to protect consumers, as well as wildlife, our air, and our water, we've turned some of the biggest environmental challenges into incredible economic opportunities. We've passed some of the toughest standard emissions in America, the strongest energy efficiency laws, the most ambitious clean energy goals, and we have protected our coasts and stopped offshore oil drilling. Now, our air. Now, as a result, our air is cleaner, our water is healthier, and our kids are, in fact, breathing easier and living longer. But this is not just about the environment. I want to underscore the following. This is also about our economy. Over decades, our decades-long commitment to energy efficiency, which began in Jerry Brown's first stint as governor back in the 1970s, has not only kept our state's electricity consumption flat, despite a steadily rising population. We are 40 million now, the largest population in the nation. It has kept California's energy spending among the lowest in the nation. Over the decades, these efforts have helped save American households billions of dollars in avoided fuel and energy costs. In fact, despite all the doomsday rhetoric we've heard from critics over the years, Californians actually spend less on energy than almost every single state, but save a few, 3 states specifically. We spend about half of what the average Louisiana and North Dakota household pays. And we know that North Dakota, as well as Louisiana, are very fossil fuel dependent states. Since we passed AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act, back in 2006, our per capita GDP has grown by nearly twice the national average. And we've easily outpaced the nation in actual real job creation. Jobs that you can actually quantify and measure. Jobs that you can actually verify. In fact, coming off the worst economic recession since 1929, the Great Depression, we harnessed the power of the wind and sun to create more than 500,000 new jobs in the clean energy space alone, just in California. That is a major accomplishment. Putting California workers on a pathway to higher quality of life. Now, this is a statistical fact, not an alternative fact. There are now 10 times more clean energy jobs in California. Bless you. There are 10 times more clean energy jobs in California than there are coal mining jobs in the entire nation. Which is why the president's fossil fuel fetish just isn't just environmentally out of whack. Economically, it simply doesn't make any sense. Because what you're doing is, in fact, you are going out of your way to create winners out of losers. Because the bottom line is this: when we move forward clean energy goals, we have 4 goals in mind. 1 is that we want to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions atmospherically. 2, we want to reduce harmful criteria pollutants, NOx, SOx, particulate matter 2.5, short-lived climate pollutants, black carbon, methane. 3, we actually want to grow an economy. We want to put people to work. Jobs that are labor-intensive, jobs that you can't outsource to a right-to-work state or offshore to Guangzhou, China, or elsewhere. And 4th, believe it or not, we actually want to cut taxes. Now, what do you mean when I say, how do you cut taxes? Well, you cut taxes, and it's manifested by when you open up that bill. Because it's not your energy rate, but rather it's your energy bill that counts. Because that's what you pay out of your pocket. And that's what counts. And that's why I said our consumption with regards to energy is among the lowest in the entire nation. Why? Because of our energy efficiency policies. Reducing our energy load, whether it's sensor lighting, whether it's HVAC systems, whether it's double pane windows or window fenestration, whether it is insulation. We have reduced our energy load, therefore our consumption for energy dramatically in comparison to other states. Then on top of that, we come in with renewable energy, whether it's utility scale or whether it's distributive generation, rooftop solar for everyday Californians. In fact, if the president really wants to put people to work and make America the world's super energy power, he should follow our lead here in California. In California, we're not holding the free market back. In fact, we're pushing it forward. We're disrupting the status quo, catalyzing investment, innovation, as well as competition, and charting a much more prosperous and sustainable economic path. Our commitment to strong environmental protections is a leading reason why California remains the nation's capital of innovation. We didn't grow into the world's 6th largest economy and the epicenter of innovation by embracing alternative facts or pseudo-scientific nonsense. In fact, in this state, we make public policy based on facts as well as science. And we're not going to allow one electoral aberration reverse generations of progress at the height of our historic diversity, our scientific advancement, our economic output, and our sense of global responsibility, not in a great state like California. And that's why I'm using every second, every minute, every day of my time in the Senate, as well as the leader of the California State Senate, to push California even further. As you know, last year I introduced Senate Bill 100 to put California on the pathway to 100% clean energy. Zero carbon energy by the year 2045. Now, let me say that this bill is very much alive. In fact, it's currently parked in the Assembly. It passed the California State Senate. Bless you, you know. It passed the California State Senate, our Senate floor, our Appropriations Committee, as well as the Utilities Committee. It is parked in the Assembly Utilities Energy Committee waiting for a vote. And I see this as an incredible opportunity for California. And I hope that my colleagues in the Assembly will recognize that and treat the bill like the priority it should be. Now, just think about the progress that we have made since we first passed our first RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, and the incredible verifiable economic benefits. Now, in the past 20 years, we have gone virtually from 0 to 50% in the last 20 years. The first was then Senator Byron Scher from Stanford, from Palo Alto. He took us from 0 to 20%. And back then, we had the naysayers, the rhetoric from the doomsday predictors, that in fact you would destroy an economy, that utility rates would rise, and in fact more people would have to pay at the pump, and you would put people out of work. Then from 20%, we went to 33% with my then colleague, Senator Joe Simitian, also from Palo Alto, Stanford. Took it from 20 to 33%. Same doomsday rhetoric. And now we've taken 33% to half, 50%. Now, not from Stanford and not from Palo Alto, the peninsula. I'm more from Boyle Heights, right down the street, and Lincoln Heights, and for those from San Diego, from Logan Heights as well. So I don't put this in context because in the last 20 years, we've gone from 0 to 50%. This is the sixth largest economy in the world. This is not Vermont and this is not Maine. This is a dramatically different scale. We have 40 million individuals. When I say we're the sixth largest economy, there's only 5 economies larger than that of the great state of California. And I'm just using GDP as an economic metrics because I know it's controversial, because I would actually measure outcomes in terms of favorable health outcomes as well as educational outcomes too, which are very, very critical. Poverty outcomes as well too. But for lack of a more objective, instrument to use as a measurement to quantify economic growth, I'll use GDP. There's only 5 large economies in that of the United States of America. The United States as a whole, in the aggregate, China, Japan, Germany, depending on the fluctuations of the sterling, the pound, the United Kingdom, that number 6 is your great state, the state of California. And if you are remotely interested in rounding out the top 10, number 7, it is France. At number 8, it is Brazil. At number 9 is a nation that's been in the news quite a bit and will be so for the foreseeable future. It is Russia. And number 10, it is Italy. So California's GDP is larger than that of Vladimir Putin's Russia, to put this in context. So that gives you real context as to what's at stake and what we have done so far. But you move this through policy. That's why I'm informed by the best scientists, Nobel Prize winners, fantastic staff who help inform my decision making once I make the decisions to move politically. But it takes leadership as well, because you can have a room of Nobel Prize winners, whether it's Stephen Chu or whoever it may be. I've sat down and had dinner with Muniz the other day, Ernie. Great folks, smart folks, but it takes political leadership to make this happen, because we all have the data. This is not a scientific issue. Let me be very clear with each and every one of you. That's why I'm incredibly motivated and inspired by all of you here today who engage with your members of Congress every single day, every single week, every single month, to push them on the issue that's an existential threat to the way we do business, to our quality of life, to our children's future, to our economy. And when I say that this is not a scientific issue, is because I mean it. This is a political issue, first and foremost. We have all the empirical evidence. 2 + 2 is 4. It is not 5. It's just that simple. 2 + 2 is 4. And when we have the scientific evidence and the empirical data, that means that regardless of who you are and where you come from, whether you are from California, whether you're from the Southeast, Alabama, or points in between, whether you're from the Northeast or the Midwest, when you're presented with data that clearly demonstrates the potential catastrophic, apoplectic, if you will, to get a little biblical, of what's looming on the horizon, it is incumbent on you as a policymaker, regardless of your political party, to take action and to do everything within your power to protect your economy, to protect your people, to protect our way of life. So that's why the role that you all play is absolutely critical role. And I appreciate what you do every single day. Now, as I just mentioned, we've created hundreds of thousands of jobs, good, clean energy jobs, in the process across every corner of our state. But in particular, and it was mentioned, I think Meredith mentioned, we take 25% of all cap and trade revenue. That's a baseline. It's the law of California. It's unlike any place in the entire world. Remember having dinner with Todd Stern, who was our official State Department representative representing the United States of America, and President Barack Obama at the Conference of Parties 21 in Paris, France, talking about what we do in California, where we intentionally and purposefully take billions of dollars that are auctioned through the cap and trade revenue program that we have under Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006 and now SB 32, and we take a floor of 25% and we invest these dollars in communities that are disproportionately impacted by both CO2 as well as other criteria pollutants. You have to do this. Energy efficiency, weatherization, low income, rooftop solar, bundling rebates. So folks of color and low income folks can actually have access to the latest and greatest and cleanest technology. Purchasing an electric vehicle or on the secondary market. They may not be able to purchase a beautiful product like a Tesla, for example, but they can get access as they should get access. Because if we allow the free market forces to dictate who gets access, then the reality is this. If you live in Coronado, if you live in La Jolla or Mission Hills, if you live in Corona del Mar, if you live in Palo Alto or the Palisades, and if you have an energy efficient home, if you have energy storage, if you have rooftop distributed generation, if you have your own charging stations, if you have a beautiful Tesla, that's not enough at a macro level to deal with the existential threat of climate change. That's why what we do in California is we democratize our climate change benefits to make sure we do our very best, to make sure that all individuals, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from, regardless of the hue of your skin, regardless of who you love or what God you pray to, you have access to the latest and greatest and cleanest technology. You must do it intentionally and with a sense of purpose. Now, let me say that we're with Senate Bill 350, which is my measure that takes us to 50% renewable energy by the year 2030. We are already about maybe 10 years ahead of schedule. 10 years ahead of schedule. In fact, down in San Diego, Sempra Energy, San Diego Gas and Electric has already made it public that they are at 43%, and they will get to 50% by the year 2020. That's 10 years ahead of schedule. And that is policy, sending the right market signal to the private sector that catalyzes this innovation and investment to help create the technologies that are critically needed and are vital to reduce our carbon footprint. Policy must drive this, first and foremost. And that's why leadership counts. It is absolutely critical. Without it, none of this comes to fruition. All the evidence suggests that 100% clean energy is in fact within reach. And the overwhelming majority of Californians support this goal. In fact, 76% of Californians, strong majorities, both Democrats as well as Republicans, want California to move toward a 100% clean energy future. And to their credit, California companies like Google as well as Apple, they themselves are moving to 100% because it makes business sense for them. Even Budweiser gets it. The world's largest brewery will be running on 100% clean energy by the year 2025. And as the sixth largest economy on the planet, California can show the nation and the world what is possible. And we can create a truly sustainable economy for our kids and future generations. Now, I know the concept of 100% clean energy has its critics, even among those who want to see it happen. This is something that will work out. But I can tell you this, that I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, and I will wrap up shortly. But I hope that those of you who support this goal and support this bill will make your voices heard in our state capitol. It's absolutely critical because once we do it in California, we believe strongly that other states will follow. And in fact, other red states will be forced in some form, way, or shape to actually accept that renewable energy, it's not partisan because the win is not Republican or Democrat. You know, if the Republicans were smart, they'd take windmills and put the U.S. flag and say it's patriotic, it's Americana, you know? And they wouldn't view it as a progressive goal or policy. In fact, the issue of clean energy, it's not democratic. It's not progressive, in fact. It's nonpartisan. It's scientifically driven. It happens to be that Democrats and progressives mostly move forward these policies, manifested in conferences, manifested through policy, manifested through marches, manifested through academic papers, however it's manifested. Because, you know, it's not a cheap shot, but, you know, like I said, we believe in facts and we believe in science that helps inform our decision making, which is absolutely critical. But I do need all of you to call, to write, to tweet, visit your assembly members and tell them that you support 100% clean energy future. Now, I want to make a few brief observations before I conclude. While it's certainly not helpful to have a hostile Congress and administration in Washington, it won't be enough to halt the global momentum of clean energy. I'm still very optimistic. I am still very, very optimistic for a few key reasons. The first, as we have already discussed, is the power of state and local leadership. The second is the growing international momentum, even among some of the world's largest polluters, like China and India. China sees the writing on the wall. They're investing massive amounts of capital to try to take the lead as the world's clean energy superpower. In fact, we have an individual in the White House who is literally serving on a silver platter the clean energy leadership mantle to the Chinese. And the Chinese are more than happy to assume that global mantle leadership. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the incredible technological breakthroughs of recent years and their effect on global markets. Over 60% of all new energy generation in the United States in 2016 was from wind as well as solar, and prices are falling dramatically. Clean energy is now cheaper in many parts of the nation than natural gas, even without subsidies. In fact, over the last 7 years, the nationwide trend for wind is down by 2/3, 66%. And solar is down 85%, according to the industry and analysts at Lazard. Many solar projects across the country are being priced at $1 per watt, down over 75% since 2011. And a growing number of very politically conservative states like Iowa, Texas, as well as Oklahoma now generate at least 20%, 1/5, of their energy from wind. As clean energy costs continue to decline, demand will increase, employment will grow, and the political dynamic will shift. In the meantime, we will continue to use every legal and political tool at our disposal to accelerate the process. This is a very exciting time. A very exciting time, regardless of who occupies the White House today. Because with or without Washington, we still move forward. And the world is watching closely what we do here in California. That's why what we do makes a difference. Now, when I mentioned about Senate Bill 350, there was a provision inside Senate Bill 350 that no one really caught. More importantly, the fossil fuel industry, which is transportation electrification. Now, let me ask an honest question here, because I sort of kind of predict what the answer will be here. How many folks truly drive a zero emissions vehicle? Okay, a little more than expected, but clearly, easily less than half. Now, I understand that the majority of us Californians, Americans, drive internal combustion cars because they're there. And because when you have to fuel up, well, we have gas stations all over the place, whether it's Chevron, whether it's Shell, whether it's 76, whether it's Mobil, Valero, Tesoro, whether it's Exxon Mobil, Arco. It's that simple, because you have to live life. Place of worship, go to work, go to doctors, go to the park, go to the movies, enjoying life. And you need to get from point A to point B. It's that simple. And that's why the vast majority of Americans and Californians drive internal combustion cars. Well, with Senate Bill 350, we're going to change that because it's going to be transformative. Going back to what I said earlier about only certain types of technologies being accessible to a certain segment of society. We're going to have charging stations in the not next 10 years, not in the next 5 years, but I predict within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll have charging stations that will be ubiquitous, like gas stations, up and down the state of California. And that will change dramatically. That will change dramatically and be the tipping point, where now there won't be any range envy, or not envy, I should say, but range anxiety, you know. There may be some range envy, you know, and that will be dictated by one's socioeconomic strata and what kind of vehicle you can buy and how far you can go, you know, on your charge. But range anxiety will be a thing of the past. And this will be transformative, because now we know that if you want to, like I said earlier, on Sundays, go to a place of worship, go to a conference, go see a movie, go to a restaurant, go see a doctor, go to work, drop off your kids off at school, pick them up. We know that we'll have charging stations that will be ubiquitous. And that will be transformative for the state of California. And that will demonstrate to the nation as well as the world that it can be done. The bottom line is this: it doesn't make a difference if you're a Republican, because who wants to pay more money out of your pocket, regardless of what the fuel is or what the energy origin is? Now, if you live in Alabama, for example, and if you drive a Ford F-150 internal combustion pickup truck, EcoBooster, you're getting about 28 mpg, more or less. 10 years back, you were getting about 16 mpg. So if you live in Alabama, and I'm going to make an assumption, and you don't believe in climate change because of California's fuel efficiency standard, you're driving a pickup truck that gets you from point A to point B with less money, which means you have more money in your pocket. And means you're also polluting less, even though it's an internal combustion vehicle. These are the policies that we move forward that help improve the human condition for all individuals, regardless of who they are and where they come from, regardless if they even believe in climate change. This is why what we do in California is so absolutely critical. And by doing so, we will continue California's trailblazing tradition. I want to thank each and every one of you for the wonderful opportunity that you have given me to share a few words with each and every one of you. I want to say that I'm truly inspired by all of you as pioneers, as environmentalists who preceded me before I entered this world. Quite frankly, I've learned a lot from many. When I became elected official for the first time in my entire life, which was back in 2006, the California State Assembly, I didn't know what carbon was. I thought carbon was carbón, for carne asada, you know. True story, you know, I'm not joking. I had no clue what carbon was. CO2, I said co, you know. And then why is the little number 2 behind that, you know, 0, you know. But it's leaders here and pioneers here who preceded me, who are activists, environmentalists, who really have shaped our agenda. So from the bottom of my heart, to each and every one of you, thank you very much for this opportunity. God bless you, and let's keep moving forward. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, yes. Okay.
We're going to take some questions now, so if people would like to queue up here in front of the mic there, and why don't you just say your name before you start, and then...
Robert Ha from Pasadena Foothills chapter.
Hi, Robert.
Senator de Léon, thank you so much for all your support in these progressive causes and for SB 350 and SB 100. So I have a question regarding grid regionalization. And do you think if grid regionalization gets pushed through as the governor wishes it to be, will that essentially booby trap SB 100?
That's a very good question. Why don't I share my thoughts with regards to grid regionalization, and without going into any commentary in terms of traps being set, you know, for SB 100. I'm on the record, and I've said very openly, clearly, that I don't oppose grid regionalization. I have certain benchmarks that must be met before any type of grid regionalization, at least under my watch, ever comes to fruition. I understand conceptually the idea of grid regionalization. However, for me, there's certain benchmarks that must be met. Short of that, at least under my watch, it's not going to come to fruition. Number one, we have an administration right now that's very hostile to clean energy. And with grid regionalization, we lose our sovereignty as a state. So number one, you cannot undermine California's clean leadership. It's just that critical. You have a FERC right now that's under the command and control of an administration that's hostile to clean energy. So we have to deal with sovereignty issues. Two, we have to deal with the issue of, obviously, it's related to sovereignty, the issue of governance and how the governance structures played out. Again, we lose our sovereignty when the governance is amplified with other voices. And I understand and respect that other states would want to have governance representation. But if you're going to deal with other states who export coal, you know, thermal coal, which has a declining domestic market, but is looking for international markets right now, I'm not into that right there. We can't be importing dirty fossil electrons. You know, I'd like to be in a position where we're exporting clean electrons to other parts of the country. Thirdly, the issue with regards to the economy and jobs. You know, I'm concerned about, unless there's a pathway for continued sustained economic growth and putting people to work in California, I'm for it. If there's not, and there's leakage to other parts of the state, which I'm fine with other economies growing too, but not to the detriment of the workers of California. And lastly, and I'm sure there's more factors, I just don't have them all on top of my head right at this moment, you have to have a foreseeable tax cut. And again, that's manifested, a tax cut by paying lower utility bills. Because I wasn't an elected official at the time, but when the legislature was sold a bill of goods on the issue of energy deregulation, as a result, you had a sitting governor, a Democratic governor, lose his job. And that was Gray Davis. Because that's when we found out about, you know, Enron and other energy speculators on the spot market who fleece California taxpayers. In fact, it's the largest transfers of wealth in the history of the state of California outside to energy speculators. That was the largest transfers of wealth. And it was thievery what took place. And as a result, There was major cuts as well to public schools, to investments, to folks who have, the beginning signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. It had a profound impact on the general fund budget because of what took place with energy deregulation. So I'm a very optimistic, idealistic person, but I'm also cautious to make sure we have protections that are set in place. And if those benchmarks are hit, then I'm fine with decarbonizing the grid and regionalization. But those are the benchmarks that must be hit. Thank you.
Tom Brady, Pasadena chapter.
Hey, Tom.
Hi.
Not the quarterback,
No,
Tom
no,
Brady,
not
right?
that.
That's,
Do you have any advice?
I'm gonna say you aged since the last Super Bowl.
I
That's
know. Do you have any advice for us on the union opposition that came around SB 100 towards the end there? We were, in terms of lobbying, we're at a Glendale public hearing recently, and the IBEW workers were getting involved there too. So I was curious. This is becoming quite an issue.
Yeah, it's a little complicated, to say the least. I'm trying to work with our colleagues in the labor movement, and I know that there's concerns, in general with regards to investor-owned utilities, who services the grid, and what jobs will be left in the near future, and distributed generation and the issues of CCAs and how all these factors sort of kind of play itself out. I understand the concerns of our union brothers and sisters because there's a sense of fear. Will I have a job, in the future? I can say this is something that we have to address. This is something that we have to meet head on because what we don't want to do is move clean, sensible, solutions, but to the detriment of workers. And all of a sudden, we've created this unemployment, because we went in this direction, So it's a little more complicated than what I'm explaining. But I recognize the challenge, but I'm always up to a challenge to try to forge a common strategy to accomplish our goals and to make sure we keep people employed for the foreseeable future.
Thank you for being here, Senator.
Thank you.
And for your leadership on the issue of climate change. My name is Narayan, and I'm very concerned about carbon pricing, as are most of the people here. And according to climate economists Nicholas Stern and Joseph Stiglitz, in order to achieve the 2-degree limit, to keep
The what agreement?
the 2-degree limit,
Okay.
to keep global temperatures within 2 degrees of pre-industrial levels, we need global carbon pricing in the range of $40 to $80 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2020, and this needs to be $50 to $100 by 2030. However, the carbon prices that we've seen in California are not close to that level. As of January 8th, they were closer to $15 per ton, despite the extension of the cap-and-trade law. So in the UK, they faced a similar situation. They were covered by a European emissions trading system, which had very low prices. And so in response, they passed a top-up carbon price, which raised the carbon price to £23 per ton, and provided the price signal to shut down the coal industry effectively. And it reduced their emissions to levels not seen in the past century. So is there a chance of doing something similar here to raise our prices of carbon emissions in the state of California? And if not, what do you propose doing about the low carbon prices in our system?
Oh, you're a smarty pants, aren't you?
Did my research.
Well, let me go to the UK. UK, and I understand what you said with regards to UK. UK's, regardless of the price on carbon, are nowhere near as progressive as we are. And coal in the UK has been dropping quite dramatically, way before they put the price on carbon in the UK. I was there, and I spoke in Westminster too on this issue, and I was with the. It was when David Cameron was Prime Minister. The Minister of Energy, Lord something. It's Lord. It's the major difference you learn when you're an American is you have to leave America to find out. Wow, it's by title, by lineage. It's you become a lord. The price, obviously, with CARB, when they're CARB members, is lower than people would like, and you make the correlation with regards to two Nobel Prize winners, Stiglitz, economists, to say that carbon has to be at X if in fact we're going to meet our challenge, with regards to 2 Celsius. These are conversations that we have ongoing right now with the administration, and how do we balance the economy, jobs, at the same time understand that with empirical evidence we got to get to a certain point. What I would say is this is an ongoing and fluid conversation. This is a conversation actually that we have a lot in my personal office with my staff. I can say the following, not that I'm trying to be vague or ambiguous. This is a fluid and dynamic conversation that we're having right now as we speak in the state capitol. It's not the first time I've heard this concern. I've heard it on numerous occasions too. So this will be a conversation that we continue to happen, but I'm clearly aware.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Hi, I'm
It looks like you're going to be a Nobel Prize winner yourself.
I'm Judy Burlfine. I'm with the North San Diego County chapter. And maybe you answered this a little bit, referring to the unions, but I'm asking about SB 100 in general. When do you think it'll come out of its current
That's a good
committee
question.
and get a vote?
It got out of the Senate Rules Committee. The Senate Utilities Committee, the senator from San Diego, farther south, Senator Ben Waso is the chair. Out of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Ricardo Lara from the Los Angeles area is the chair. We had a very robust debate on the floor, and I think we had every I think we had every single Democrat vote for Senate Bill 100. It went to the Assembly. We had a very robust debate in the Assembly Utilities Committee. It went to the Assembly floor, waiting to have a debate on the floor, and then it got sent back to Assembly Utilities Committee. I don't want to say there's no skullduggery, going on, or chicanery, but it's my hope that we can. It's my hope that within the next month, that we can unearth, the measure from the Utilities Committee. It's already had a vote, doesn't need another vote, and have a floor vote. It just requires a simple majority, not a supermajority. That's 41 votes, and I feel strongly, I feel confident that we can actually secure the 41 votes. We just need it to be unleashed, if you will, to get to Senate, to the Assembly floor. Once it comes back to us in the Senate, obviously it'll pass quite easily on a concurrence vote, and then we send it to the governor's desk. With Senate Bill 100, it's not like we're in the beginning stages or even in the middle. We are kind of there. We just need to have the floor vote, and I'm confident that once we have a floor vote, we'll get it passed. So your tweets, your phone calls, are absolutely critical, and I'd ask for your support with that right there. Thank you. Well, maybe my answer should be brief. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Barry Barry Engelman from the Los Angeles chapter, and also
Barry.
from the Republic of Santa Monica.
There you go. Love
And,
it. I was there last week, Saturday.
I want to, first of all, we were very appreciative about a year and a half ago when the joint resolution was passed calling upon the President and Congress to enact a carbon fee and dividend. That was passed, I think, a year ago summer. And then more recently, when the cap and trade bill was revised, we were hoping that some sort of a carbon fee and dividend would be adopted, and we realized that they felt it was impossible. But my concern is, with 76% of Californians in favor of climate change, it was felt that that unnecessary concessions were made to the petroleum lobby when the cap and trade bill was passed, and that wasn't just from our organization, but it was written up in the newspapers also, pretty aggressively. And I was wondering if you would comment on that.
Well, that's a good question, Barry, and or commentary. On the let me take on the dividend. I am actually open to the idea of a dividend. I like the idea of returning back money to the people of California, so they make a direct correlation with regards to, carbon dioxide reduction, and lo and behold, they're getting money. They may not understand it completely, but there's sort of this sort of direct relationship between I'm getting a check, I like it. Any attempt to undermine what I'm getting, I may not understand precisely why I'm getting this check, but I like the idea I'm getting money, and I'm gonna support whatever regimen exists for it to continue. On the issue of the concessions with regards to the fossil fuel industry, it's a bicameral body. That's all I can say. I take care of my business in my house. It was a little more challenging on the assembly side because of perhaps the influence of the industry itself on a handful of members. I believe, I'm on top of my head, did we need 2/3 vote? We needed a 2/3 vote. When you have a 2/3 vote, that changes the complexity quite dramatically, where folks when you're at a 41 simple majority vote and you're at a 2/3 vote, the outcome for a 41 vote is much more predictable and will probably be much better for all of us. When you're at a 2/3 vote and you have an X amount of members that are in the cat's seat, to negotiate and squeeze more concessions, if you will, for certain industries, it comes to a decision you have to make with regards to, do we accomplish this and move forward, or does this fall apart? Let me tell you, if it had fallen apart, it would have sent a very bad signal, not just to the nation, but to the entire world. And with a Trump administration, had this fallen apart in California, although not perfectly ideal, but I still believe good enough, for right now, the political repercussions would have been very severe, and I believe strongly it would have set us back quite tremendously. We don't live in a world of absolutes. I agree with you, and I understand where you're coming from. What changed the complexity was it wasn't a simple majority vote, but a 2/3 vote. And a 2/3 vote with all the resources that they had to harness against what we wanted to accomplish came to bear. Be mindful, when I had Senate Bill 350, the fossil fuel industry, remember, it was 50% energy efficiency, which we accomplished. It was 50% RPS, which we accomplished. And remember the other provision, it was 50% reduction in petroleum use. And we got that bill all the way to the assembly floor. So I had to remove the 50% reduction in petroleum use, or the bill wasn't getting through. And to put this in context in terms of clean energy, it's like saying, world hunger, world pestilence, and ending poverty. We got 2 of the 3, which I thought was major. And but it's a strong influence still, even though we're California. They have a very powerful footprint in California still, nonetheless. But I understand what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. We negotiated what we had on the table. I think the consequences would have been much more worse, exponentially much more worse, had we not secured a deal, and it just fell apart. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
I invite you. Let's give a hand to Senator de Léon, and we're inviting him to stay now for hors d'oeuvres. So if you can do that, that would be wonderful. He'll be here to answer additional questions. And now we're going to transition to our awards.